Hi everybody and welcome to my tour on London's palaces. I'm Chris and I'm an architect and I'm going to show you around the area. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not a real crown. We're standing in front of the iconic facade of Buckingham Palace, a structure that's steeped in history, whispering tales of queens and kings, scandals and celebrations. Up there you can see the famous balcony where lots of notable events have been celebrated, including VE Day at the end of the Second World War, where the King and Queen, Margaret and Elizabeth and Winston Churchill waved to the crowd. Also, the marriage of William and Kate, and more recently, the coronation of Charles III. Of course, no trip to Buckingham Palace is complete without seeing the changing of the guard. But what is this curious British ceremony all about? Dating back to the reign of Henry VII, it involves the new guard changing place with the old guard outside both Buckingham Palace and St James's Palace. Wearing their famous red and grey tunics and bearskin hats, the guards march over from Wellington Barracks to change place with the old guards outside Buckingham Palace, accompanied by a band where they salute each other and present arms before changing places. The ceremony lasts for around 45 minutes and takes place every other day from August to May and every day in June and July. Although it might look pretty cool, I'm not sure how much fun being a guard would actually be. They're on duty for either 24 or 48 hours, during which time they alternate between 2 hours on guard and 4 hours off guard. While on guard, they can't eat, sleep, smoke, stand easy or lie down. Still, every 10 minutes or so, at least they're allowed to slope their arms and march 15 paces across the area of post a few times. It might seem like just a bit of touristy fun, but I certainly wouldn't mess about with them. If you get too close to a guard, he'll instruct you to stand back from the King's Guard. And if that doesn't work, he'll shove his rifle in your face. By the way, the changing of the foot guards at the palaces is not to be confused with the changing of the horse guards that takes place over at the Horse Guards Parade. In fact, things can get really confusing when the horse guards, complete with their shiny metal helmets and plumes of horsehair, pass the foot guards as they head in opposite directions up and down the Mall. What does it mean when the Union Jack is flying above a palace? That's right, it means that the king is not at home. If the king is at home, a different flag flies over the palace, the royal standard, which is divided into 4 squares. 2 squares with 3 gold lions on a red background represent England. The square with a red lion on a gold background represents Scotland, and a golden harp depicts the square for Ireland. The palace has over 700 rooms, and you can visit 19 of them between July and October every year. And if you do something good for a charitable cause, and with a bit of luck, you might be invited to the monarch's garden party, where you'll get to bow or curtsy, drink tea and hang out in the palace's enormous garden, just like my mum did one year, and now she pretty much thinks she is the Queen. From an architectural point of view, it consists of 2 phases, with the eastern facade behind us being added in the second phase. And although this facade represents the most familiar image of the palace today, a creamy grey Portland stone neoclassical structure with Corinthian columns and triangular pediments, it has been criticised for being somewhat dull. The first phase is identifiable from its yellow bath stone, which arguably would have been more impressive without the addition of the eastern facade. Designed by the architect John Nash for George IV in a U-shape, curiously, the marble arch stood out the front as the entrance before being relocated to its current position at Hyde Park. By the way, before he became king, George IV was known as the Prince Regent. And although he wasn't well liked, in this image someone's painted him with a huge bottom farting so powerfully he's knocking people over, which I think could be a useful skill to have. He was a great patron of the arts and, working in partnership with Nash, set out to beautify the capital, producing Regent's Park, Regent Street and Regency architecture in general. In front of the palace stands the Victoria Memorial, which, believe it or not, commemorates the life of Queen Victoria. It consists of the winged goddess of victory standing above the statue of the Queen looking down the Mall. Facing the other directions, different statues represent the qualities that made her beloved: motherhood, justice and truth. The four outer corners of the memorial comprise massive bronze figures with lions representing peace, progress, agriculture and manufacturing. We're standing in front of Friary Court at St James Palace, and you can see the boxers for the foot guards behind me who guard the palace when the king is in London. The building goes back into the realms of regal history. In fact, if the walls could talk, they'd tell you some eye-watering stories. The palace was built by Henry VIII in the 16th century as he wanted a retreat that he could escape to from the formalities of Whitehall Court. He moved into the building with his second wife, Anne Boleyn, before having her head chopped off in the not too distant future. On a similar theme, Charles I also spent his last night here before heading over to Whitehall to have his head chopped off. It was at St James Palace where Queen Anne famously cured people of scrofula, a nasty sounding bacterial infection of the lymph nodes known as the King's Evil, just by touching them. Today, it's not only inhabited by Princess Royal, Princess Anne and Princess Beatrice, but if the stories are true, a load of ghosts that haunt the place. From an architectural point of view, it was constructed in the Tudor style, a uniquely English phenomenon at the time when continental Europe had moved on to the Renaissance period. The style most closely relates to perpendicular Gothic architecture. With flattened arches, lots of red brick, big chimneys and castellated walls. The most striking architectural feature is the famous gatehouse. Actually, for a royal palace, it's considered by critics as being rather modest, or in the words of some, low, plain and ignoble, almost like an Oxbridge College stranded in the middle of the West End. It's rumoured that there is a secret tunnel connecting the palace with the building across the street, which is now Berry Brothers Wine Merchants, where Charles II, who was a bit of a lad, would meet his mistresses in secret. In the early 1600s, Renaissance architecture finally arrived in England, and it was thanks to one of our architectural heroes, Inigo Jones, who designed the building behind us, the Queen's Chapel. Serving as the wedding venue for Charles I and Henrietta Maria, and subsequently becoming her private chapel, the building has the hallmarks of classical Renaissance architecture, with its symmetrical arrangement of columns, pilasters and pediments. Internally, the building has a double cube shape with an elliptical gold vaulted ceiling. These kind men have promised not to shoot us as we get a closer look at the creamy white building behind us, Clarence House. This royal residence was originally built for the Duke of Clarence, who eventually became William IV. Those avid viewers of The Crown will know that Elizabeth and Philip originally lived in here before they reluctantly moved into Buckingham Palace when Elizabeth became Queen. It has also been the London home of Charles and Camilla, and they're still living here while Buckingham Palace is being renovated. That's why, if you look closely, there are foot guards outside and the royal standard flies over when the King's in London. The building was designed by John Nash, and you may be getting a sense of just how prolific he was as an architect. The stuccoed mansion has the key features of light, creamy Regency architecture with its classical proportions, rusticated ground floor, coins at the corners and cornices dividing the different stories. The street we're standing on, Pall Mall, is actually named after a leisure activity that by all accounts involved hitting a ball with a mallet through hoops similar to the game of croquet. In the 17th century, the famous diarist and cool dude Samuel Pepys wrote about going to St James Park and seeing members of the royal family playing the game. Further up Pall Mall, you can find the house where Nell Gwyn lived, the most famous of Charles II's mistresses, described by Samuel Pepys as pretty witty Nell. She was a real Cinderella figure. Growing up in the working class area of Covent Garden with a cross-dressing mum who ran a brothel, Charles II first clapped eyes on her selling oranges at the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane and helped her to become an actress before she died at the age of 37 of syphilis. We've made it to the last of our central London palaces. Located on the other side of Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens, Kensington Palace is not only a private palace but also a public museum. The main part of the palace was originally called Nottingham House until William and Mary bought it in 1689 and converted it into the lavish palace that we see today. Its original purpose was originally a countryside getaway for William, who suffered from asthma. And in fact, you can see a statue of William standing behind me in front of the palace. William and Mary employed our architectural favourite, Christopher Wren, to expand the building. Adding a 3-storey pavilion to each of the 4 corners, he also reorientated the house to face west. It became the favoured royal residence for the next 70 years and a hub of fashionable society under Queen Anne, who also had the orangery constructed by Wren's disciple, Nicholas Hawksmoor, where she could grow trees and exotic plants and host summer parties. Queen Victoria was born here, and so were her 9 children, and there's a memorial statue to her out the front. More recently, it's known for accommodating Princess Margaret and, of course, Lady Diana until her tragic death in 1997. Today, it's the official home of William and Kate, the younger brother having moved to California. The state apartment rooms are open to the public, where you can see lots of dresses worn by Queen Victoria, and you can also visit the charming gardens shaped by Queen Caroline, wife of George III. Architecturally, they say that the building was designed in the Jacobean style, corresponding to the second phase of Renaissance architecture in England during the reign of James I. For me, however, it can be more simply described as a piece of early classical Renaissance architecture, but with an emphasis on brick rather than stone. Anyway, it's outside Kensington Palace, the last of the jewels in London's historical crown, where we're going to end the tour. But before we head over to the Orangery for tea, scone and champagne, just to say, if you have enjoyed the tour, please do leave a like, or better still subscribe, and I'll see you on the next tour.